on part 5 of the Judges. And if you were here from the start of this series, we've started off in week 1 looking at the first 3 judges and talking about not getting stuck in a cycle of apostasy, which is basically a cycle of following after Jesus, then stopping with Jesus, then starting with Jesus and stopping with Jesus. And tonight we're going to see kind of just how much getting stuck in apostasy can affect our lives like it started affecting the nation of Israel. And in week 2, we looked at the life of Deborah, and we saw how God used her gifts of leadership to help the Israelites. Then week 3, we looked at how Gideon was used by God, who was a timid fella who wasn't very sure of himself, and God used 300 people to help him battle through and get physical and mental victories for God. And then in week 4, we looked at one of Gideon's sons, Abimelech, who is referred to as kind of the anti-judge, and because he was rejecting God, rejection oftentimes was leading to the destruction of people, but even God can use crazy circumstances like a woman dropping a rock out of a tower for God to move. So my message for tonight is this. God will use us despite our flaws. And I could just preach right there, but we're going to actually get into this and read this. You know, some of the most loved characters in movies or in literature are the dynamic ones. And the dynamic characters are basically those who begin to change, grow, learn, or they expose some of their faults through a story that we kind of start to see the human side of them, right? My favorite dynamic character is Batman. I love Batman. Batman starts off as a little boy who loses his parents, and he goes through all this struggle, and next thing you know, he becomes, I'm Batman, right? And it's just, he's the man. And even as Batman, he goes through this struggle with trying to balance being the good guy, and sometimes he goes a little too far, and he might be the kind of bad guy at times. The other one is a famous guy named Darth Vader. Anakin started off great, and he turns into Darth Vader, and then he goes back to Anakin. By the way, for those of you that are Star Wars fans, I'm still mad that they changed the original trilogy and got the old man out the video. I'm like, Anakin was old when he died. He needs to stay old. Anyway. Didn't like they brought back the young Anakin. Iron Man. How many Iron Man fans we have? That guy's just crazy. I'm not going to get into his issue. But we can even look at like little Marlin from Finding Nemo, right? Even Marlin goes through some dynamic changes in Finding Nemo to be this guy that ends up crossing the ocean to find his son. But a lot of these characters, we really do fall in love with them because of their flaws. Because we can kind of see ourselves sometimes, and we can relate with people that are flawed. Because no one in here is perfect, right? And Bible characters are the same way. Most of the Bible characters we read about, they're flawed. They have a lot of issues. There's only one, in fact, in the entire Bible is not. His name is Jesus. He was the only perfect character in the Bible. All the rest of them have flaws. And tonight I want to look at a guy with some flaws. His name is Japheth. If we look at this guy in his early life, he would not have been the guy voted to most likely to succeed. He would have most likely been voted the least likely to succeed in high school. So we're going to look at this story in Judges chapter 11, verse 1. Oh, and I forgot I had my notes on the screen tonight. Cool. But before I read this one, I thought I'd tell you that this story has a very, very dark ending. This is not one of those stories that we read and we get to the end of the chapter and we're like, oh man, God is cool. We get to the end of this story and we're like, that's in the Bible. That's kind of how we're going to end this. So I'm just going to give you a heads up ahead of time. And if those of you that were here for our Bible series, I've often taught in that series, I told you guys that a lot of stuff we learned in the Old Testament is for inspiration and understanding, and the New Testament is how we live. And the reason why we teach that so much and why I say that so much is because of stories like this that you read in the Old Testament that would make you wonder. It's the things that make you go, right? That's one of these stories. So let's look at it together. In verse 1, it says, now Jephthah of Gilead was a great warrior, and he was the son of Gilead, but his mother was a prostitute. What a way to start off the sentence. He was a great warrior, but his mama was a prostitute. Verse 2, Gilead's wife also had several sons, and when these half-brothers grew up, they chased Jephthah off the land. You will not get any of our father's inheritance, they said, for you are the son of a prostitute. They really want to let us know. Verse 3, so Jephthah fled from his brothers and lived in the land of Tob. Soon he had a band of worthless rebels following him. A couple things I want to point out about this guy. Number one, he was a great warrior. In these times, in this setting, a great warrior would have been elevated. A great warrior would have been someone who was celebrated. So this guy, even though his mama is a prostitute, would not have been looked at as, oh, that's the bad kid. They would have looked at him and said, man, that's Jephthah. That dude can fight. That dude is something else. He knows how to speak. He knows how to do stuff. That's a cool dude. Like, people wanted to hang out with him. When his brothers started to speak out against him is when things started getting bad. Now, he was a direct descendant of the Gilead tribe. His father was most likely not Gilead, though. It just means that he was a descendant of Gilead. This goes all the way back to the Deuteronomy text, and we can dig into all that and look at it. But he would have been in that lineage, which means he had the right to take it, but because his mom was a prostitute, the brothers would have had to accept him. Right? So a lot of times you'll read about stories in the Bible, and we know that the dads would oftentimes have many wives and stuff like that, but when the dad went and did something with a prostitute, it kind of changed the game and the rules a little bit. And so they could have rejected him right then and there, and that's exactly what they do. So now all of a sudden, Jephthah, the great warrior, as he's talked about in the very first sentence, has now taken on the stigma of being rejected and pushed away. And this is going to start to develop as the story goes, that this guy's going to have an issue. And how many of y'all would admit that you would have had an issue if this was your life? Okay. Now, last week we talked about Abimelech, right? And we talked about how they ended up giving him a lot of money, and he went and hired some crazy people, right, to work with him. And basically, he hired some troublemakers. Y'all remember? That's how the NLT says it. Well, Jephthah didn't have to go hire anybody. Because he was a great warrior, people just wanted to be with him. And so he gets a bunch of worthless rebels to go hang out with him because he didn't have to spend any money. And that's exactly why they're called worthless rebels, because they were working for no pay. And sometimes when people want to attach to you and they have no worth, they can oftentimes start feeding things into you that might start making you think about things in the wrong way. And so all of a sudden, Jephthah gets a bunch of worthless rebels. In other words, free people to hang out with him. Just for the fact that he was cool. No other reason, like, hey, I heard you can fight. You got my back? Where you want to go? I'll posse up with you. That's kind of what's going on here. And so this kind of gives you an insight into his life as he runs away and goes into this town. He picks up a group of people that's kind of his little posse. I'm sure he'd probably get in some fights from here and there, to keep his wits about him. You're going to see he's very good with words. And this is kind of what starts to happen in the story in verse 4. So it says, about this time, the Ammonites began their war against Israel. When the Ammonites attacked, the elders of Gilead sent for Jephthah in the land of Tob. The elders said, come, be our commander, and help us fight the Ammonites. Now, can you see this dude with his worthless friends? I can see them all now like, boy, I knew they were going to come get you, bro. That's why I'm your boy. I knew this was going to work out. Right? They're excited. They're all pumped up. But Jephthah said to them, aren't you the ones who hated me and drove me from my father's house? So now he's feeling himself right here, y'all. He's like, I know who I am. I know how to fight. Now y'all want to come talk to me. Now y'all need me, right? So why do you come to me when you're in trouble? Because we need you, the elders replied. Needing much? Thirsty. Anyway, so the elders replied, if you lead us in battle against the Ammonites, we will make you ruler over all the people of Gilead. Let me go back for a second. Come be our commander. Jephthah understood what he was doing. It was a strategic thing to put a word of whisper in the people's head. He didn't want to just be their commander. He was hurt. He was frustrated. He was angry. They kicked him out of his town. They removed everything that he thought he deserved. And now they want to come to me. I don't want to just be your commander. I want to be your ruler. We will make you our ruler over all the people of Gilead. So Jephthah said to the elders, let me get this straight. If I come with you, and if the Lord, now that right there, we've been talking about a lot of judges. And we've been seeing that a lot of the judges like to say this right here, especially with Gideon. God, if this is really what you want me to do, the test was always between the other judges and God, though. Jephthah took it a step different. Jephthah said, well, if God helps me out, then I'm going to receive something. And there was a difference in communication with this judge for the first time. He wasn't concerned that the Lord was going to give him victory for Israel's sake. He was concerned that the Lord was going to give him victory for his sake. There's a big difference with this judge than a lot of the other judges. Even Abimelech, as messed up as he was, understood that there was something about serving God that would have helped him. He just was so jacked up in the head, he ended up killing all of his brothers. If y'all remember the story, he killed all of his brothers. You don't recover from that, and you just kind of go crazy, and that's why that was his demise. But he even spoke highly of God, whereas this fella's just like, hey, I've read the books. I know a little bit of the stories. I know a little bit of the Torah, which we're going to see in a minute. He knew just enough to use the right words to get himself in trouble. And it started right here. Verse 10. The Lord is our witness, the elders replied. We promise to do whatever you say. Silly, silly people. So Jephthah went with the elders to Gilead. I'm sorry, y'all. And the people made him the ruler and commander of the army at Mizpah. In the presence of the Lord, Jephthah repeated what he had said to the elders. So he's just pushing this over and over. Then Jephthah sent messengers to the king of Ammon, asking, why have you come out to fight against my land? Now, this is where he has enough knowledge to be dangerous. And I'm going to explain some of this in a minute. But he starts to ask the right questions. Now, the reason he asked his questions is because he knew enough about the law in Deuteronomy, because in Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 10 and 11, it states that before you go to fight, you should peaceably try to resolve your issues with those you're going to fight with. For everybody in the room, this is how we're supposed to handle all conflict. That law still holds true today. Peacefully resolve your conflicts. Just don't go all gung-ho on Facebook for me, okay? Okay, so why you come out to fight against my land? The king of Ammon answered, Jephthah, messengers, when the Israelites came, did y'all give me some coffee? Oh, y'all are awesome. When the Israelites came out of Egypt, they stole my land from the Arnon River to the Jabbok River, and all the way to the Jordan. Now then, give me back the land peacefully. Then Jephthah sent this message back to the Ammonite king. And I'm going to summarize this just because if I read it all and then tried to break it down, it would take me a lot longer. But this is literally what's going on. Jephthah initially tries to resolve this problem with peace. And he goes to this king and says, listen, why are you asking this particular question? Thank you, sir. Yo, we got the best group of people ever in this church. And so he's trying to handle this without having to be a military might and a military strength. And unlike the marauders that we saw back in Gideon with the Midianites, right? These guys were just ruthless. They had no stopping. When they came on the scenes, they destroyed everything they could destroy. The Ammonites had settled into the tribes and into the area. So the Ammonites had established foundations where they were. But there were some problems. If you remember the story, when Israel left Egypt to cross into the promised land, they were making some deals, and God told them that there were certain people that they could not attack because of their lineage. The Ammonites were some of those people. The Ammonites were also, and just like the Moabites, they were descendants of Lot. So all their land was protected. Lot was under the original covenant with Abraham. And so when the Israelites were crossing through, they couldn't attack them. But the Israelites tried to work out a deal with these people. And the Israelites came to their towns and said, hey, we need to cross through. And they said, no. No, it ain't our fault y'all been slaves all this time. This is our land. We didn't go to Egypt. Y'all went to Egypt. We suffered through the famine. We didn't go and get all this stuff. We weren't blessed by Joseph, right? I'm making all, like, I can't back all this. I'm just going to give you all how I think it went down when the Israelites showed up at town. Because they would have struggled through a great famine after the blessings of the Israel nation with Egypt, and then they fall into slavery, and then they had to come out. So all this is going on. Now, the Edomites, which is also in the same area, this was the descendants of Esau. The Israelites tried to pass through Esau's land. Well, we all know Esau didn't like his brother, so he didn't let the Israelites pass through. And their stories passed on from years and years and years and years. And like, no, we're supposed to be the blessed people, but no, Jacob had to come and be stupid. And so they're like, we're not letting y'all through either. And so all this was left alone by the Israelites, and they end up having to take a long path to get into the promised land and fight their battles and go through all their different territories. Well, because of this, the Amorites came into the scene and started destroying all of Lot's possessions and all of Esau's possessions because they didn't let Israel pass. And so Jephthah knows enough about the history of his people to know, you have no fight with me because we didn't cause you to lose your land. You lost your land because you weren't obedient to God and let us pass through. And so God allowed your land to be attacked by other people. And so Jephthah is explaining all this to them, and he's having this debate with them. And of course, he doesn't listen at all. And he basically ignored it. Let me pull it up so I can read it, because it's cool what he says. I forgot to copy it and put on the notes there. There it is. I should have my glasses on. So Jephthah sends this big old long letter that I just kind of basically wrote to you. And then verse 28, the king of Ammon paid no attention to Jephthah's message. So Jephthah gives him all of his own history lesson. And this king is like, dude, I don't even care. Not my problem. All I know is that y'all are now occupying a section of the land that these people took from us, and we want it back. And Jephthah's like, man, you must have not heard about me. I'm a warrior, and my mama was crazy. Oh, I did put it in my notes. So let me read it to you. So therefore I have not sinned against you. Rather, you have wronged me by attacking me. So let the Lord, who is judge, decide today which of us is right. Israel of Ammon, right? So you can see the cockiness in this statement, right? This is not like, a righteous cockiness right here. This is a come at me, boy. I know who God is, basically. He's like, I know who Yahweh is. Yahweh has a promise for us. Even when we're dumb, he still helps us out. And so the king paid no attention to that. So at that time, because God is good, the Spirit of the Lord came upon Japheth, and he went through the land of Gilead and Manasseh, including Mizpah and Gilead, and from there he led an army against the Ammonites because God showed up, and he started winning. Now, this is where I can't make many more jokes. So I've been trying to make you laugh as much as possible because the rest of the story gets really deep and really dark really fast. Let me read it to you. So Japheth made a vow to the Lord, and he said, if you give me victory over the Ammonites, I will give the Lord whatever comes out my house to meet me when I return in triumph, and I will sacrifice it as a burnt offering. I'm going to explain this the best I can, because like I told y'all before, this is one of those things that the world will show you in the Bible to try to trip you up and show you, look what God allowed to happen. But I need y'all to understand that God did not allow this to happen, and it was not his plan. Now, I had to set everything up for you, how Japheth knew enough about the Torah to get himself in trouble. He knew enough about the Israelite history to get himself in trouble. Because the Lord never demanded any such bargaining for his favor. Ever. Oftentimes, when you would see a vow like this made, a vow to the Lord, it was a sacrifice of an animal, or it was a symbolism that would have been made, an altar that would have been made. This statement, he never had to make. But Japheth had gotten so full of himself that he makes a statement that he is not going to want to back up, because he knows just enough to get himself in trouble. And this is why I want you guys to understand my message thought for tonight. God can use us even in our flaws. Because oftentimes, as Christians, we know just enough to get ourselves in trouble. But yet God can still use us, and God does still use us. Just thank God we're not as dumb as this guy. So the common preparation for battle, I just got to explain all this to you so you get this in context. The common preparation for battle was that there would have been a priestly sacrifice. So what they should have done, if he would have been following the law the way he was supposed to, he would have pulled the priests together and said, we're about to go. The Spirit of the Lord has come upon me. I feel victory. We have nothing to fear. We're about to do something amazing. Let's sacrifice to the Lord a sweet aroma as we go into battle. He does not do that. That would have been the proper thing to do. Instead, he vows that possibly some person that he loves is going to be the first person to walk out his house and him have to sacrifice. I don't even know what was going through his head to make that kind of vow. And I just want to give us a warning real fast. Sometimes, I don't know what is going through our heads. Some of the bargaining tools we try to make with God to bail us out of our problems. Okay. Verse 32. So Japheth led his army against the Ammonites, and the Lord gave him victory. Gave him victory. He crushed the Ammonites and devastated about 20 towns from Ariar to to an area near Minnith, and as far away as Abel Keramim, In this way, Israel defeated the Ammonites. So everything's going great. When Japheth returned home to Mizpah, his daughter came out to meet him, playing on a tambourine and dancing for joy. She was his one and only child. He had no other sons or daughters in his home. When he saw her, he tore his clothes in anguish. "Oh, my daughter," he cried out, "you have completely destroyed me." When I told y'all, aren't you glad you aren't as dumb as him? Even that statement. You brought disaster on me. For I have made a vow to the Lord, and I cannot take back. He knew just enough to get himself in trouble, because this is not a true statement. This statement is not true. The Torah, if he would have knew what he was talking about, he could have made a switch for the offering. But he didn't. Because he was foolish, and he was living life for himself, and just hoping God was there to bail him out through the process. Japheth never had the right intentions to do what God wanted to do. He was just doing it enough to hoping God would be there to bail him out. See, according to the law, he could have completely changed this situation. The vows that were taken were usually invalid. Like normally you could not have changed, according to Numbers chapter 30, verse 2. But the Old Testament recognized a few circumstances under the law where you could take an unwise vow and set it aside, which we see in Numbers chapter 30, verse 6 and 8. It says a human sacrifice was forbidden in the law. Japheth could have substituted and did something different. But Japheth was not aware of the law, and it gets crazy. And she said, "Father, if you made a vow to the Lord, you must do to me what you have vowed." Now, this is where we have to understand the consequences of our own words. Because when he came out and said, "You have completely destroyed me," this girl could no longer understand that it had nothing to do with her, and it had everything to do with the person who spoke the words. God can still use us even when we speak negativity into other people's lives. Okay? You must do to me what you have vowed, for the Lord has given you a great victory over your enemies, the Ammonites. But first, let me do this one thing. Let me go up and roam in the hills and weep with my friends for 2 months, because I will die a virgin. "You may go," Japheth said, and he sent her away for 2 months. She and her friends went into the hills and wept because she could never have children. When she returned home, her father kept the vow he made, and she died a virgin. So it has become a custom in Israel for young Israelite women to go away for 4 days each year to lament the faith of Japheth's daughter. Japheth's folly demonstrates just how far Israel's society in this time got into lawlessness and apostasy. They have gotten so confused. God keeps bailing them out over and over and over and over and over and over. But they've gotten so far away from the original understanding of what God's plan was for them that this is what ends up happening. And the reason why it was still a custom for Israel to continue to remember this is because all this stuff was documented. And this would have been one of the stories that the priests would have told to the people of Israel. And the priests would have opened up the book of Judges and would have stood before them and explained how far away they got from the law that it was costing people's lives. And I have to challenge you again tonight, y'all. When we get away from God's plan, it's costing people's their life. Every single person in this room, we have a responsibility to be used by God to reach someone for Jesus. 2 Corinthians says it like this. Chapter 4, verse 6. For God who said, let there be light and darkness, has made this light shine in our hearts, so we can know the glory of God that has seen the face of Jesus Christ. We now have this light shining in our hearts, but we ourselves are like fragile clay jars containing this great treasure. This makes it clear that the power is from God and not from ourselves. Every one of us is just as flawed as Japheth. Every one of us. There's no one in here that's an exception to the rule. For all have fallen short of the glory of God. Every last one of us. It doesn't matter if you've been saved for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. We can all get stuck in apostasy. We are fragile jars of clay that are supposed to have this light shining out of us. The thing that amazes me, though, about the difference in our past and their past is that we are truly fragile. And if we don't take what God has placed in us, we are dark people that has a light on the inside of us that makes us different. It's the only thing. I'll say it one more time. It's the only thing. The same people that we judge have the same story as we do. Our only difference is the light. The same people that we get upset with are the same people that are just like me and you. The only difference is we have a light. The thing that we have to learn, though, is that people's lives are at stake. And the light that we have on the inside of us is supposed to be passed from one person to the next. And if we're not passing our light, we are fragile jars of clay that will eventually break because we're not using our purpose. The story that we read of this guy, as crazy as it is, should inspire us to never take for granted what God is trying to do. And never do it in our own accord, but we always do everything for Him. No matter what we're going through, no matter what we see, no matter what we're dealing with, we don't do anything for our own accord. Everything we do should be for God's glory. When we're working, it should be for God's glory. When we're raising our kids, it should be for God's glory. You know, I could use the raising our kids thing as an example really quick. You know, it always used to make me laugh when I would, coaching up Micah through his years of playing baseball. And we always had those people out there that kind of try to live through their kids. You know what I'm talking about. The danger of trying to live through your kid is the same danger that Japheth had in his life. You know, for me, I was never a great athlete, so it was easy for me to watch my son go out there and play because I was like, bro, you're good, get it, bro. I could never do that. That's awesome. You just threw a curveball. I don't know how to do that. It's still, I'm like 30-something years old. I had no idea how to throw a curveball. I'm talking about back then. I know I'm 41 now. I still don't know how to throw a curveball. But anyway. So it was different, but for those of us that we try to live through other things or try to find our identity through things that we shouldn't find it in, and that's what we can't do. Japheth was trying to find his identity in something he could never find it in. This is why it wasn't good enough just to be a great warrior. That wasn't a good enough title. It wasn't good enough to be commander. That wasn't a good enough title. He wanted to be ruler. And I promise you, even if that would have worked out for him, that wouldn't have been good enough either. And he would have been constantly pushing and constantly pushing. And this is why he ends up making this dumb vow, because he was always pushing for more for himself instead of more for God. So let's not push for ourselves. Let's push for God. And let's be like those jars of clay and be the light in darkness because we are now light because he shines in us, not because of anything we've ever done. Amen? So stand to your feet as I pray out. Father, I thank you for your word. Lord, I thank you for the stories that you've provided us to be able to read and to glimpse into people with great flaws, with great problems, so we can look at our own lives and realize that we have a chance. You used J-Path, Father, even though he was not in the right spirit and didn't have the proper heart, but you still used him to give some relief to your people. And God, sometimes our hearts aren't always right. And sometimes we don't always make the right decisions. But God, I still believe that you can still use us every single day for your glory. What I pray, though, Lord, is that we realize that we're doing everything for you and that we will open our eyes in every situation of life to see what you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish through us so that we can keep you as a center of our lives and everything we do. So help us tonight to stay focused on what you have for us. In Jesus' mighty name, amen.